passed, we will get started with our Finance Committee meeting. Doesn't look like any public comment, so we'll just plunge right in for the action items.
All right, we're number one. Good morning,
Morning.
Finance Committee, and the action items. We first have a donation, which from WCSG Radio for snow pants, hats, coats, and boots, valued about $10,000. So we reviewed this, and we need your acceptance to actually to recommend it to the board for their full acceptance, since it's over our threshold of $2,500.
Any comments or questions? Yeah, it's quite lovely. All in favor of, or can I have a motion, I guess?
I'll move to accept.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, passes. Thank you.
Deal. And then item 2 is our purchasing agenda, which again needs your recommendation to the board for their meeting February 1st. A couple of larger items on there. One being the initial commitment, if you will, of our bond issue. And actually, I'll give you an update on that at the end of our session here. Other than that, there's the other item there is the Harvard Leadership Academy. It's been funded. Really, we're in our second year of that, mostly from Steelcase Foundation dollars. And there's a whole series, actually, of sessions of the next year or so. So we brought it as one group, essentially, so you can prove it once, and we can spend against that approval. And most of the leadership within the district will be involved in some way with the Harvard Leadership Academy. And then a couple other items, robotics program, which is in full force this year, and WEMCAT is helping us coordinate that. And then Maida's new role in the diversity program, and she's got some 41A grant for some additional funding for a program for English language learners at the elementary schools, as you can see there. And then, of course, Ken's big item with the Covell renovation primarily. So,
let me just clarify. This is the first bid package for Covell. There are 4 bid categories we have to rebid yet. So this isn't everything. But at the end of the day, we will, and it's listed under sinking fund, but it is both sinking fund and bond dollars. At the end of the day, the project cost, we have a cap of $7 million of bond dollars, and then we will put $500,000 to $1 million of sinking fund dollars into it. That's the funding split. We'll have to figure out maybe we'll have to have a bond category besides sinking fund in the future. This is right now the only project that will share the 2 funding sources. Once we get into it, they will all be bond.
That is, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking, wow, I didn't know that we had that much left in the sinking fund, and then I know we had talked about.
Yes, we've got another year to go.
Right. No, but this whole $5.5 million, and and I saw the warm, safe, and dry, but primarily bond proceeds and warm, safe, and dry. To what extent? So thanks for that clarification. Any other comments or questions? Can I have motion to?
So moved.
Support. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. We'll send that to the board also. Next item.
next item is the December, which are the first 6 months of our fiscal year, financial statements. And there's a dashboard in the front which kind of gives you a summary of the general fund, where we stand through 6 months. As I mentioned at our work session a couple of weeks ago, we've been in the process very diligently of reviewing all our finances with the anticipation of bringing to this committee next month's meeting, Amendment 1. As I told you, we already know that based on our, we did lose a few students this year, so we do know our state aid likely to be cut about it results about $1 million loss in state aid. We're also looking more succinctly at the expenditure side, where we stand and where we think we're going to be. So these financials through December, really nothing impressive about. I mean, we're kind of tracking that way, but I think it's more relevant to figure out where we're going to be these last 6 months. And again, we're in the process of doing that. We'll have enough information, and I missed the board meeting last week, but I believe there is going to be a work session just prior to the board meeting, the 15th. We'll have an idea of that, even though we will not bring the amendment to this board this committee until the week after. We'll have an idea on the 15th when we meet with you is where we stand. The anticipation of communicating, talking with you about the financial piece for the union negotiations. So good information, historical information, but where we are going to be the next 6 months, which we'll know here in a few weeks, is more important. We'll bring that to you when you get to that point in time. So other than that, the one thing I did change on the flash reports is kind of to be consistent with the fund balance calculation, the early warning, which we discussed at the work session. So I did change in the flash report, the fund balance calculation to conform to that. So I've used unassigned general fund balance over annual revenues, and you can see through 6 months we're well above the 5% threshold, and as we were a year ago. So that's the only change we made in terms of what you've been seeing historically. So that's all I need to say about that. I'll certainly, any questions anybody has, I'll be happy to answer.
Anything? Nope.
Ken, I'm warm, safe, and dry, if there is.
Safe and dry. We still have some stocking masonry to finish up from last summer when the weather warms up and allows us. And then the only 2 other projects that are remaining that will bring our we have to do heating controls for this building, an upgrade, and we have to do the roof at Wellerwood. That's in addition to the 4 that were approved a month ago. Everything else we'll hold off till and make our decisions for the final year of warm, safe, and dry and what's most critical.
Any questions?
No.
Thank you. We'll proceed. Actually, do we have any specific policy action items, any updates? I don't see anything in the packet. Anyone want to bring up anything? We did have, I think we had the presentation at the work session in regard to our report that we had been sort of hoping this committee would see in August or September. Was there anything that we wanted to add to that report, to the Energies Facilities report? We were talking about student performance. It's not, it's in an old packet, but if you want to send me any information that we would like to see, and then a timeline, or, do we just want to review that in August? I think from some board meetings and a retreat, people want to have more of an idea of what's going on with the budget, and I think that that's a big way that we as a board can drive some discussions. Do we want to revisit that once we have some better ideas in regard to how the state aid fund is going to go this year, or and who knows how long that's going to actually even take this year? It seems like it's really
Yeah, I mean, we were at a MSBO conference a couple days last week and had presentations from the state regarding not only they had a revenue estimation conference middle of this month, and
Right.
looked at that, and those projections actually reduce the school aid fund in the current year. It still has a positive fund balance, but it's down about $118 million than what they had projected the last estimating conference. The 2017 school aid fund is really contingent upon what the legislatures decide to do with Detroit Public Schools. We actually had their CFO did a presentation the second day there, and he stands by, they need $725 million to essentially bail them out. And the big question is, where does that money come from? I heard today, driving in, that one legislator over the weekend thinks the surplus we had last year, $600 million, should all go to Detroit. But if it's spent out of the school aid fund, then there's really not going to be anything left for the rest of us. Did not sound optimistic for next year. One of the things we're hoping for by the time I meet with you in the work session on the 15th is the governor's budget generally comes out the first couple of weeks of February, which will give us some sense of what he's thinking. But who knows? So it's if they try to fund it out of the, like I said, out of the school aid for Detroit bailout, it's tough. And there's a lot of other things the general fund needs money for. I mean, Flint's one of them, as we know, and the Obama or the Affordable Care Act. We have to start paying. The state has to start paying the enhanced Medicaid that comes out of the general fund. The road repair solution requires $500 million out of the general fund. No one's really identified what's going to be cut to find that $500 million. So there's all those questions out there that we typically have. Those are big questions. The other thing we found out last week, quite frankly, is that the school employees pension fund, which I've told you before, already has a $25 billion unfunded liability. The return on assets this year was 2.5%. They have a projection of 8%, again, year to year. But the other issue is they were way off on their salary increase assumptions, where they had presumed, I think, a 3% increase in wages. And again, the current funding is a percentage of wages, so the higher the wages, the more the current funding goes to the program, while wages actually decreased 2.5%. So about a 5.5% gap in the wage growth factor they use in the actuarial. So those on the surface would indicate that liability is going to grow. Whether or not there is any additional relief we need the states to take out of the school aid fund remains to be seen. They're trying to cap it at this 26% threshold, and they actually projected that would go down, I think, after this year or next year, but that may extend that period of time when that rate starts going down a few more years, depending on how things are going. Of course, the return last year was prior to this month of January, which has been very volatile in the markets in general. So needless to say, it's all kinds of question marks that we typically have, and that's why it makes it challenging. So.
As we learned last year, the lottery money that people always think comes to schools doesn't actually come to schools. And so if they actually gave us the money back that I think a lot of people think they're investing or, doing a school donation when they're buying their lottery ticket, it's really not. And so to switch something like that would be beneficial. So shall we focus on maybe doing this energy facilities report, just keep that for August, but maybe get an update at the end of February in terms of revenue sharing and the governor's budget. And just something not super in depth, but that way we can keep the board appraised of what what's happening. Okay. Anything else?
We're past sustainability update then?
There wasn't one.
And the board fund balance change.
Yeah.
Just let me then address the board fund policy, general fund policy we discussed at the work session. And the policy, which was adopted, I think, in 2009, really is not relevant to measure anything. And we talked about bringing to you and the board a new policy. One of the things we also learned last week is that the state treasurer, which really has authority with respect to schools as it relates to early warning. And they have been given, frankly, unprecedented flexibility, if you will. They pretty much can do what they want, when they want, even though they have some guidelines. the guidelines that are actually in the law are pretty broad. One of the things I did find, maybe I knew before, but I forgot, one of the things I did was reiterated to us is that the treasurer can basically declare any school district in financial distress, whatever way they see fit. The only thing that's in the legislation itself is this 5% rule as one measure. The Treasury had developed a scoring system they were going to use based on several financial metrics. Found out last week that they're throwing that out, and who knows what they're going to do. So I'm going to suggest that we hold off on recrafting that policy till we have a clearer understanding of what they're in fact are going to be doing. The other question we have is how this fund balance metric they threw out there, which is unassigned fund balance divided by revenue. It's also a question as to how they define revenue, because again, it can be defined differently. And so we're waiting for answers on that. So I'm going to suggest we hold off until we get some additional clarification, so we only amend it once instead of amended it now and things change. But yeah, that's if the treasurer determines that you're in financial distress and you don't do what they ask you to do, they can essentially immediately order an emergency manager to take over without going through the steps that are in the emergency manager law. They're able to bypass those steps and take any school district directly into an emergency manager situation. So that's the thing that was kind of scary, that I didn't realize they had the ability to do that. And so that's why I think this staying out of early warning is to our benefit, quite frankly, because the other thing we mentioned is they can essentially hang on to you as long as they want. It's up to them whether you're out of financial distress too, and can be out from under their burden. So I hope to have some additional clarifications with that stuff at our next month's meeting. But until we get that clarification, I suggest we hold off on changing the policy so we can be consistent with what Treasury comes out with at that point in time.
I would like to loop back on a subject that we had talked about last year, and that was looking at our contracting with Local First and what our minority contractors look like for the district. And not to make work, but I think it's important that we loop back in view of the fact that we will be contributing a great number of dollars to our local community and the economy.
Yeah, I can speak on that, Dr. Flores. We've actually been meeting last 3 months, I think, right, Ken? A group of us, superintendent, called that meeting, and myself and several, there must be 6 or 8 of us in there internally, with the intention of doing that. We're looking at what that policy, if that policy is to be expanded. We're looking at what additional things we can do. We've actually met with some community partners. At our last meeting, which I think was last week or 2 weeks ago, Cheryl Hall, their purchasing director, had met with Spectrum Health, who has a very robust policy that touches all aspects of diversity in their organization. And Spectrum Health was very helpful. They said they're willing to share everything they have with us, and even so we don't have to recreate the wheel. So our intention is to, as we continue to meet, is to recraft a better policy. We certainly will bring it to you at that point in time, but we're not there yet. But a lot of it was information gathering. In fact, we're doing that right now. I believe a email went out last week to all our vendors asking for some information, a lot of information, including some of the diversity stuff, so we can get a handle on it. So we're building a database currently, and then we're looking at how that needs that purchasing policy, not just for construction, but overall, and needs to be recrafted to ensure that. And one thing Spectrum told us that, this isn't a short time fix. It takes a lot of work, a lot of effort over a period. I think they're in their maybe 6th year of their program. And the thing that they have is they have a big department, because they're obviously a large organization, so they have the ability to, like I said, help us without additional cost. In fact, they do it for free, basically, including use of their data systems, if that's appropriate, and policies and other collaborations they have, and those kinds of things. So it was very And so I think our next step is we'll continue to meet with Spectrum and firm up how that arrangement will probably look, as well as continue internally with recrafting a overall policy. I don't have anything else that you want to say, but that's where we stand at this point with that.
So a timeline for submission of data or collection of that data and reporting back to us, what does that look like?
We haven't, pardon me? Yeah, we don't have a time plan at this point in time, but, maybe at our next meeting, we can talk about some timelines. Again, we're trying to gather information right now to see, so we make an informed decision, certainly, and we covered all our bases.
And then another question related to the bond issue and reaching out to the diverse community that we have of contractors is, what do we have in terms of additional marketing effort toward that population, or in West Michigan or in Grand Rapids? Or, are we making an exerted effort to that?
Well, I attend the Monday group, which is every other month group of folks from the city, construction managers, folks from Contractors Association, including West Michigan Minority Contractors Association is a active participant. Just to keep in touch allows those organizations to know what we have on the table to look for bidding. One of the things we've started doing is sending our notices to those organizations, and if there's others that get in touch with us, we'll send them to an organization when we have a notice of bidding so they can distribute to their membership. We're trying to keep in tune that way. What do they need? Part of what we're looking at as part of our group is, as we deal with construction managers, how do we divide up the bid packages so they're really available for our local contractors, making sure we don't make them too big, that we bid people out by how we put them together. So we're looking at things like that also.
How long have you been doing that, breaking down the bid packages?
Well, typically, that's a construction manager's responsibility, how they put them together. So we've been looking at it as part of our group that Larry mentioned, as to what direction do we need to
So over the
give
last
to
7 to 8
make
months
sure
or so then.
it's available to the broadest spectrum of contractors we have locally. Or is there a way to encourage that there's partnering between smaller contractors so they can handle? Often their issue is getting a bond to cover their work. And are there other ways that allow them into a larger job? It's not quality of work. And it may be manpower, but often it's bonding. But are there ways to tie them together? And that's not unusual to see partnering.
Right. Anything else?
Yeah, I guess whatever you can do that is innovative, whether they're offers, conferences, or getting contractors together and reaching out. I think I would encourage that, recognizing that those dollars need to contribute to the economy and the development of all groups, all sectors in our community. So that's important. And then one prevailing question that I have, and I don't know where that's being addressed, is what are we doing with respect to addressing the drastic teacher shortages that we're going to encounter? And Superintendent Neal, that might be something that extends beyond finance, but certainly has implications for finance in the future. I've been reading a lot about, how teachers are being driven out of the profession. The increased supervision and evaluation that, one questions whether it's legitimate evaluation or not. We have this tremendous push against teachers, and so many have opted to retire or leave the field for other avenues. And what are we doing? How will we secure in the future the teacher force that we will need that reflect our community and that advance the goals of educating our children in this country and in our community? Do we have things on the table?
Well, I think so. First of all, I think it's exciting that we are breaking down and working with groups. This is a good new innovation for GRPS and probably for the city as well. So that's very good that we're working better with contractors. I will talk with the superintendent and Dr. Baker, President Baker, about maybe this can be some work session in regard to teacher shortage and sort of long-term planning. So obviously, we're doing a lot in terms of trying to increase salaries in this crazy economy and making healthy accommodations. But I think that that's a bigger picture item that, I'll talk with them and get with them and see what we can do in terms of a work session.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'd just like to begin the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's great. Anything else?
Just a quick update on the bond process. Just got it over the weekend, actually. The preliminary offering statement, I just got a draft over the weekend, so I'll be reviewing that. We have a conference call this Thursday with us and the underwriters of our financial consultant and legal counsel. I'll go over that POS. We did send an application in on Friday, I did, to Moody's. Moody's will credit rate the bonds, and that'll take most of this month in terms of we have a school district rating, which Dr. Flores, before you were on the board, it was fall of 2014 that Moody's actually re-rated the district as a whole and reaffirmed our AA- rating. Rating this time is specific to the bonds and our ability. So it's a little, I mean, they look at certainly some of the same stuff in terms of the districts as a whole, but their major focus is on the ability of the district to pay the bond, the debt service. And a couple things in our favor, great leadership and the fact that you may recall the bonds are paid with property taxes. So we're seeing, this is a great, economically, we're seeing property values go up and a vibrant economy. So those macro level items are important when you talk about rating a bond. So again, we have a conference call on Thursday, and then our plans are still is just try to issue the bonds 1st of March, or so this first tranche, which I mentioned is about half of them, 87.5. We're still going to look at is refunding the 2000 advance refund, the 2007 issue. But we look at that regularly. If the market is right for us to refund those things, we'll do that at the same time. It saves us some dollars in terms of transaction fees. But if we can't get adequate savings out of it, then we'll pass on that and do it later. So that's but we'll probably won't make a decision until close to when we go to market. So I hope to close on at least the new issue end of the month, 1st of next month, and actually have money in the bank by the end of March. So to help certainly out with Ken's first big project there. And we got kind of a general timeline of what we're looking at. There's still a lot of moving parts that are going on there. So that's where we stand in terms of the bond process at this point in time.
Great. We ready to call this meeting? All right, wonderful. Thanks for all the great input.
Thank you.
Thank you.